responses in the children that you have within your schools. You may see depressive symptoms. You may see a child that cries for no reason. You may see a child who is unable to regulate their behaviour, not able to follow rules, not able to follow the structure. You may find that they have problems forming attachment with other children, problems with their peers, problems with teachers, just being unable to form that bond with adults or other children. You may even see things like regression. I remember that academically I was doing pretty well, but when I went into care, you could see that my schoolwork did have a detriment. It had a detrimental effect on my schoolwork. My grades got lower with every placement I went to, with every move. It was almost as if a part of me was lost each time I moved. And that was noted. That was noted by the teachers, who were all aware that I was a looked after child. You may also see another side, a child that is just very quiet and very kind of withdrawn and within themselves, that tends to hardly respond to external stimuli, who seems very much within their own cocoon. Problems like regression, a kind of going back. I remember some of the children that I came across when I was working in schools. There were children who had got to a certain level of their intellectual development, emotional development, and then kind of regressed almost. And the regression was actually quite sudden. It was very stark. Older children, you may see things like problems sleeping, problems with eating. Eating disorders are quite common in looked after children. And then you may see experimental drugs, experimenting with sex, experimenting with high risk behaviours, even things like self-harm and suicide attempts. As weird as all of those negative behaviours sound, I think for a lot of children, they're partly what we would call coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms are there, and they kind of happen without awareness. You're unaware that you're not trusting people. You're unaware that you're exhibiting this aggressive behaviour towards someone that's trying to be helpful and supportive and caring. And I think the one thing that I would say about trauma response is that for someone like me, who really wanted to get on in life but kind of didn't know or understand some of the negative things that I had experienced, those trauma responses were a way of coping. And those coping mechanisms actually worked for a while. And even though from the outside looking in, for example, my teachers, some of my foster carers, and some of the people that worked in the residential units that I lived in, their kind of stance may be that actually those coping mechanisms didn't work for you at all, Paris. But for me at the time, they were what kept me going. Keeping people at arm's length kept me safe. And not trusting people and not being an open book as soon as you met me kept me safe and gave me the safety and security armour that I needed. And by the time I met that science teacher who did believe in me, who did think that there was more to me than a ball of trauma, by the time I met her, I'd already built up so many coats of armour that she really did have to chip away at each layer in order to get to the core of who I was. And I suppose what I would say is be patient. Be patient with your students. Be patient because it will take a while to chip away at that armor and find the core of who those children are. The trauma response is a response that is a coping mechanism. And until that child finds other ways of coping that are more positive, those will be their go-to. Those will be their go-to responses. One of the things that will help, and there are many things I think that can help in the relationships that you build with children in terms of supporting resilience, is such a basic interaction skill, and that's listening. Listening is so important. I mean, we talk about communication and we teach children to read, to write. We actually don't teach people how to listen. And I think that there's a kind of a common idea that people know how to listen when actually a lot of people don't. We know that we're not listening when someone's talking and all you're thinking about is what you're going to say next, or somebody's speaking and you're not making eye contact, or somebody's speaking and you just pick up your mobile phone and just kind of start doing this. And these are all kind of things that I find irritating, that I'm sure some of you find irritating. And they're things that you would never do, I'm sure, when you're teaching a class and when you're kind of, responding to children. But I think that when you're dealing with the children in your classroom setting who do exhibit some of these very negative behaviours, I know as a teacher that classroom management is important. You have to balance the needs of the whole class. You cannot focus on this one child. But there does need to be a kind of a reflection and a safe classroom environment for you to be able to really listen to what's going on for that child. And of course, that would be best during a one-to-one. I don't think you need to be a trained counsellor to sit with a child and really find out what's going on for them. And I know that at the Pioneer Academy, one of the sort of ethoses that you guys have is around safety, security, and happiness. And I think that the best learning environment is a safe, is a secure, and is a happy learning environment. And the best way to achieve that is to make sure that you're listening to your students and you're listening to that child who seems to need more. Often, especially as teenagers, when an adult just isn't doing or saying what that teenager wants that adult to do or say, you'll hear that teenager say, "You just don't listen to me. You never listen." It's a common thing. And certainly when I'm on the phone to customer service complaining about, my phone bill that's 200 odd this month, and I don't know why it's that much. All I want from that operator at the other side of the phone is for them to actually stop and listen to what I'm saying and not cut into me and not kind of come up with a response until I've said what's going on. So listening is really important. And I think that when children are listened to, they feel safe. When children understand what they've done wrong and why they're being punished, they feel safe. One of the reasons why I felt unsafe as a child was because I didn't understand my mum's physical aggression. I didn't understand her violence. I didn't understand her moods. When you take the time out to explain to a child not why they are wrong, but why their behaviour is wrong, it's not about the individual, it's about their behaviour. I then think that really has an impact, and helps children to kind of understand. What works for me, apart from listening, I know that on my darkest days, the days where I was living with foster carers who I felt just didn't care, who I felt was just in it for the money, who I felt didn't understand how to respond to a child that had been the victim of quite severe abuse. Creativity was my saving grace. I absolutely loved reading for the same reasons that a 14, 15 and 16-year-old at the moment loves computer games. My nephew's 16 and I have no idea how he spends hours playing one computer game. And I sat him down and said, Jordan, you play your computer at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I don't get it. What is it about these games that's so... And you know what it is? It's the same thing that I loved about books. He didn't use the word escapism, but it was a world away from his world. When I picked up a book, everything that was going on around me didn't matter anymore. Even if I was in a really kind of negative environment in a family that I didn't feel happy with, the book gave me something. I was able to step into another world. And so I would argue that for some of the children that you kind of teach and look after and want to support, just remember that everybody has a creative side. Perhaps for them it's about writing things down. Perhaps for them they're not doing that well academically, but remember that they may be very good creatively. Is it art? Is it crafts? Is it jigsaw puzzles? Is it, what is it that is their creative outlet? And whatever it is, it could well be an opportunity for them to express the pain, the hurt, and the other negative emotions that might be going on for them. Throughout my time in care, I never gave up hope. Even though I felt down, even though I felt low, even though I didn't want to move again, I didn't want to go to another family. At the age of 14, I said to my social worker, I've lived with 4 separate families over a period of 8 or 9 years. I don't want to do this anymore. I just want my independence. And my social worker said, you're 14, you're not ready for independence, but let me see what I can do. And she moved me to a Barnardo's semi-independent living project where I had a room, where I had support of a residential social worker that lived downstairs. All the other residents had their room. We had a shared kitchen and bathroom. And we were given the opportunity to pay bills and be an adult. And it was great. I thrived. I was still at school. I knew what I wanted to do. But I suddenly came into myself because I was listened to. And I was given that hope. I never lost the hope, but there was more. I knew that there was going to be better on the other side. I never gave up hope. And I suppose one of the things that I'm trying to say to you guys is don't lose hope in those learners, those students that are just not coping with the classroom environment, who are exhibiting the traumatic symptoms that I mentioned earlier, who are the looked after child or children that you have within the classroom setting. Don't lose hope, because if people had lost hope in me, I wouldn't be where I am today. Adversity didn't kill me. Adversity made me stronger and made me the person that I am now. And I love who I am now. It's amazing being me. I've got more growing and more developing to do, and I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, don't lose hope in those students. There's a lot of stuff around at the moment about sort of positivity and positive attitude. And yeah, I know it all sounds a little bit cliche, but I honestly believe it works. I honestly believe that I've tended to try to find that positive out of every situation. I do believe that my fulcrum was set at that side. I really honestly believe that when those negative experiences came along, it took a lot more to push that seesaw into the negative outcome. The few positive experiences that I had as a child were enough to give me those really strong positive outcomes that I've been able to achieve in my life. Positivity and that positive perspective, it's infectious. I've noticed that when I'm around people that seem or feel a bit negative, they tend to say, "Oh, you're so bouncy, you're so positive. It really makes me feel good." And whether or not they're lying, I don't care. It's just nice to know that you can influence the way other people feel. And I know that teaching is the most difficult thing on this planet, but the most rewarding thing on this planet. And I think if you're positive as a teacher, it's infectious. The class will literally be buoyed up by your positivity. I'm sure that you can all reflect on days where you've just not been feeling great, and you're up in front of that class, and you're not your best. You put on that smiley face, and you put on that kind of armor, and you kind of like, that's it, I'm here to teach. And there'll just be these children in the class that just kind of rub you the wrong way, and it's almost as if they sense that you are not quite in the right place that day, and it's irritating because you thought you put on your best smiley face. But actually, it's interesting how we spend so much time in front of children when you're a teacher that they begin to learn a bit about you and your moods and how you are. And I remember kids saying, "Miss, are you okay?" And that's so wonderful, because it's almost as if they're emotionally strong enough to see. But it's not their job to worry about whether or not Miss Bartholomew is okay. But it does show that emotional regulation in children is a very, very important part of their development. So positivity, I think, is a really good thing. I think it works. It certainly worked for me. And even when I didn't want to feel positive, sometimes even just pretending that everything was okay was enough to make me feel slightly better. I think it's important for children to feel powerful. I think it's important for children to not feel that the power simply lies with the authority, the head teacher, the teachers, the counsellors, the adults. Children need to feel that they have some power in this world. And I think it's important for us to share that power, to really think about the way in which we empower children. Because by empowering them, they're more likely to act like adults. But they're not adults. And so it's really difficult, isn't it, when a child is, again, acting up or not doing what you kind of want them to do. And you kind of think, God, I wish they'd kind of act a bit more grown up. But they're not grown up. And when they look grown up, it's sometimes so easy to forget that they are still children. I think it's important to share that power. Power versus powerlessness. We're not listened to, and when we're not listened to, it makes us feel unsafe. When we're listened to, it makes us feel powerful. It makes us feel that we're important when somebody's actually listening to what we've got to say and listening to our opinion. I think that creating a really safe classroom environment where there is hope, a sharing of power, a good, positive approach, where children feel listened to, where there's a good bond between you as a teacher and your students. I think it's difficult to do that when you're teaching maths and you've got kids in the class that just hate maths. I always found it easy to integrate these concepts into PHSE. Personal health and social education is an excellent opportunity. Citizenship is an excellent opportunity. There are so many curriculum subjects, psychology, health and social care, where you can really impact some of these kind of concepts that I'm talking about. About 4 or 5 years ago, I started attending the Buddhist temple, and I picked up meditation, started reading about mindfulness practice, and I absolutely think that these are things that can all be incorporated into the classroom environment. Children can regulate their behaviour and show resilience if they have a way of tapping into their own resources. Mindfulness practice, being able to focus and being able to really focus your attention, to slow things down, deep breathing, and general mindfulness practices are just really, really good for children that are struggling. The children that you've got that have special educational needs, they will benefit from a classroom environment that feels safe, that feels secure, that feels positive. And I think mindfulness and meditation and somehow incorporating that into the day can really help. Just a last couple of thoughts really around sort of my experience, this word resilience and relationships, and the things that you can do that will support the children that you're teaching. And one of those things is the early identification of the children that may need extra help, extra support, emotionally, physically, intellectually, culturally, socially, spiritually even. I think labels can be quite unhelpful in one way. I think that over the years we've become more reliant on labels. But I certainly think that labels can be very, very helpful, because if we early identify that somebody in our care has something like bipolar, for example, then we can put all of the support mechanisms in place to make sure that that child gets everything that they need. And by us simply being aware of the needs of that child, then we're much more likely to be able to respond to what that child is going to benefit from. Access to a school counsellor, access to welfare support, good positive feedback. Again, well done, you've done really well, is excellent, but it's kind of not enough. It's not specific. I really like the way you checked your answers before you handed in your homework. I really like the way that you showed all of your working out on the side. When you was doing that maths problem, you didn't get it right, but your working out showed me that you understood the concept. I think that type of feedback is important. Feedback should be detailed, but feedback should really encourage and praise a child, and not just be superficial, if that makes sense. I think very specific feedback is important, and can really help boost self-esteem, boost confidence, and in turn boost resilience. To summarize and just to kind of highlight some of those key points that I've mentioned, I've not only survived, I've thrived. And I've thrived because individuals within my life never gave up on me, never gave up hope. I think inclusion is important, and I think that those things that I've mentioned, the safe, the secure environment, the environment where children feel listened to, that ability to focus on the children that need your attention and maybe give them some one-to-one time outside of the classroom environment. I think all of those things are things that would help any child to thrive. Whether the seesaw is way in the negative zone, whether the fulcrum is way in the negative zone, if those children who are on the receiving end of trauma know that there is a safe place and people who believe in them and teachers that want to see them do well, then there's no doubt about it. They will do well, they will thrive, and they will survive. And survival is important. As a motivational speaker, my talk is entitled Survive, Grow and Inspire, because I honestly believe that when you survive any kind of trauma, whether that's childhood trauma or the stressful things that can happen to you as an adult, then you can then go on to call yourself a survivor. And once you've survived, the next best thing is for you to grow and learn and become, reach your potential almost. And I love Abraham Maslow's triangle, where he talks about self-actualization, the top of the triangle. Very few of us reach that self-actualization, our full potential. But I honestly believe that if you give the right support and the right targeted attachment, secure, safe support to those children, that they are much more likely to reach the potential and that self-actualization. Thank you so much for using me as your introduction to your conference on resilience and relationships. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to getting some feedback from all of you. There is a presentation that goes with this, and there is also a list of resources. Please feel free to contact me for additional information regarding those resources. Thank you.